The Meridian Crown did not simply orbit the gas giant, it presided over it. From the outside, the station was a marvel of spun titanium and diamond glass, a halo of aggressive opulence suspended against the swirling violent violets and bruised oranges of the planet below. It was a place where gravity was a subscription service, and the air was scented with genetically patented fragrances. Inside the restaurant, Celestia, the floor was a single, seamless sheet of hyperglass. There was no carpet, no tile, nothing to separate the leather soles of the patrons from the terrifying drop into the abyss. If one looked down between their feet, they could see the commercial freighters docking miles below, glittering like schools of bioluminescent deep-sea fish. Milton hated it immediately. He stood at the maitre d's podium, fighting the urge to tug at his collar. The suit was charcoal gray, purchased second-hand from a liquidation sale of a deceased mid-level manager. It fit him in the shoulders, but was loose at the waist, and despite 3 cycles in the sonic cleaner, it still smelled faintly of mothballs and despair. "Reservation for Dorn," Milton said. He tried to project confidence, but his voice cracked slightly on the last syllable. The maitre d', a synthetic humanoid, with skin polished to a mirror sheen, looked Milton up and down. The sensors in the android's eyes likely calculated Milton's net worth credit score and the caloric density of his last meal in under a microsecond. "Table 19, the android," said the voice devoid of warmth. "The lady is already waiting." Milton nodded and stepped onto the glass floor. His stomach did a slow, sickening roll as his brain registered the visual data of falling, even though his feet remained planted. He forced himself to walk, keeping his eyes on the horizon line where the starfield met the curve of the station. He was not here to eat. He was here to work. The job offer had come through an encrypted channel 18 hours ago. The instructions were simple. Go to Celestia. Meet Leona of the Orolith. Be boring. Be insufferable. Be the kind of man who makes a woman check the time every 30 seconds. Do not be offensive enough to cause a scene, just dull enough to ensure there is never a second date. Payment 3,000 credits. 3,000 credits was exactly the amount needed to renew the biomedical lease on his sister's neural cradle. Without it, the clinic would pull the plug on her stasis in 48 hours. Milton navigated the maze of tables. The clientele here were the apex predators of the sector. They wore clothes made of light weave and drank wines aged in zero-gravity vaults. Milton felt like a grease stain on a silk sheet. He saw her. She was seated at a table near the edge of the viewing platform, framed against the colossal storm of the gas giant. The dossier had said she was Orolith, but it had not prepared him for the reality of her. She was small. In the biological classification of the Orolith species, she was what was known as a microform. While a standard Orolith stood 7 feet tall with broad, statuesque features, Leona was barely 5 feet. Her skin shimmered with a pale, iridescent gold dust, characteristic of her people, and her hair was a cascade of fiber-optic white strands that seemed to move with their own current. Her eyes were large liquid pools of emerald green, lacking whites deep and unreadable. She looked like a porcelain doll placed by mistake in a room full of heavy machinery. Milton approached the table. He had rehearsed his opening line. He was going to talk about the structural integrity of concrete for 20 minutes. "Leona," he asked, pulling out the chair opposite her. She looked up from the tablet she had been reading. Her eyes locked onto his. There was a pause. A silence that stretched thin and tight, like a wire about to snap. Milton expected her to smile politely. He expected her to look confused. He expected the standard social grease that lubricated interactions between strangers. Instead, he saw recognition. Not the recognition of knowing who he was, but the recognition of what he was. Her gaze swept over his ill-fitting suit, his nervous hands the sweat beading on his hairline, and the subtle, defeated slump of his shoulders. Her expression did not shift into anger. It settled into a profound, exhausted weariness. It was the look of someone who had opened a gift box to find it empty, exactly as she had predicted. "You are not him," she said. Her voice was melodic like a bow drawn across a crystal glass, but the tone was flat. Milton froze, his hand still gripping the back of the chair. "I beg your pardon, I am Milton. I believe we have a—" "You are the tank," she said. She placed the tablet down on the white tablecloth with precise, delicate movements. "The sabotage. The wrench in the gears." Milton blinked. The script in his head, the one about concrete density and atmospheric humidity, evaporated. "I don't know what you mean. I was told, please." She cut him off. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Do not insult my intelligence. It is the only thing the Dorn family cannot buy, though God knows they have tried." She picked up her water glass, swirling the liquid. "Seren set this up, didn't she? She has a romantic heart. She thinks I am lonely. She thinks I need a connection." Leona took a sip, her green eyes never leaving Milton's face. "And Cassian," she continued. "Her brother decided that a connection would be inconvenient, or perhaps just embarrassing. So he hired a man who looks desperate enough to take the money, but harmless enough not to cause a scandal. A man who would sit here and be so painfully inadequate that I would run back to my work and stop dreaming of compatibility." She set the glass down. "Sit down, Milton. You are blocking the view of the nebula." Milton sat. He dropped into the chair, not with the grace of a gentleman, but with the collapse of a structure whose foundation had just been kicked out. He opened his mouth to deny it. He wanted to say that he was a systems engineer, that he was a respectable citizen, that he was just a bad dater. But the lie died in his throat. It felt too heavy to lift. He looked at Leona, at the shimmering gold of her skin, and the centuries of tired patience in her eyes, and he found he could not do it. 3,000, Milton said. The words came out as a whisper. Leona raised a non-existent eyebrow. "Excuse me." 3,000 credits, Milton repeated louder this time. He placed his rough hands on the tablecloth, palms flat. "That is what they are paying me, to sit here. To talk about atmospheric recycling protocols until you make an excuse to leave. To be the wrong man." He waited for the explosion. He waited for her to throw the wine in his face, to call the waiter, to have security drag him out by his cheap lapels. He deserved it. He was a mercenary of emotions, a hired gun for a petty social assassination. Leona did not move. She stared at him for a long moment, studying his face as if he were a particularly interesting biological specimen. Then she laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was a soft, dry exhale, a sound like dry leaves skittering over pavement. 3,000, she mused. She looked out the window at the gas giant churning below. Inflation is hitting everyone, it seems. The last one was only 2,000. He tried to sell me insurance. Milton felt a heat rise up his neck that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "The last one, do not look so surprised," Leona said, turning back to him. "I am a microform oralith working in high-tier diplomacy. To the humans of Meridian Crown, I am a curiosity. To the elite, like the Dorns, I am a pet project. To the men they send on these dates, I am a payday." She leaned forward slightly, the gold of her skin catching the candlelight. "Why, Milton? You do not look like a man who enjoys cruelty. You look like a man who is terrified of the floor." Milton looked down at the glass beneath his boots. "My sister," he said. He did not know why he was telling her this. Perhaps it was because she had stripped him naked with a glance, and there was nothing left to hide. "She has a neurodegenerative condition. The degradation is at 80%. She is in a stasis cradle at the medical district. The lease on the machine expires on the 16th. That is in 2 days. And 3,000 credits buys you another month. Another 6 months, Milton corrected. If I manage the payment plan correctly, Leona nodded slowly. She did not offer sympathy. She did not reach across the table to pat his hand. There was no softening in her posture, no pity in her eyes. Milton was grateful for that. Pity from a woman he was hired to humiliate would have broken him. So, Leona said briskly, you have a choice. You can proceed with the plan. You can start talking about what it was atmospheric recycling. That sounds sufficiently tedious. I will feign a headache in 10 minutes. You will get your money. Your sister will get her cradle. Or, Milton asked. Or, Leona said, you can acknowledge that while you are a desperate man, you are not a spineless one. I think the evidence currently points to spineless, Milton muttered. You confessed, Leona pointed out. The others never confessed. They just chewed with their mouths open and checked their comms units. She picked up the menu, a sleek pane of smart glass. You are already here, Milton. The reservation is made. The table is occupied. Cassian's money is already in escrow contingent on the date occurring. He did not specify the quality of the conversation, only the outcome that we do not fall in love. She glanced over the top of the menu, her eyes sharp. I have no intention of falling in love with a man who wears a polyester blend to a 5-star restaurant. So the outcome is secure. But I am hungry. And I am tired of eating alone while the rest of the room wonders why the little alien girl is by herself. You want me to stay? Milton asked, incredulous. I want you to be a person, Leona corrected. Not a prop. Not a tool for Cassian Dorn. Can you do that? Can you sit there and consume nutrients and converse like a sentient being for 60 minutes? Milton looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the shimmering skin and the alien features, he saw a wall of steel. She had built a fortress around herself brick by brick, constructed from every sneer, every whisper, every paid-off date she had endured. She was offering him a truce. Not forgiveness, he hadn't earned that, but a chance to cease fire. He took a breath. The air smelled of lavender and money. I'm not actually boring, Milton said. I mean I am, but not on purpose. I'm an ecosystem engineer. I work in the lower grids. A sewage man, Leona translated, checking the appetizers. I prefer guardian of the biosphere, Milton said, a small, wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. But yes, if I stop working, the people on this floor stop breathing in about 12 hours. Or at least they start smelling what they actually produce. Leona lowered the menu. A flicker of genuine amusement danced in her emerald eyes. That is a powerful leverage. Do you remind them of that? Try telling a man wearing a suit worth 10,000 credits that his existence depends on a man covered in bioslime. They don't listen. They just complain that the air conditioning hums too loudly. I know the feeling, Leona said. I negotiate trade disputes between species that communicate primarily through pheromones and species that communicate through interpretative dance. If I make a mistake, wars start. But the council just complains that I didn't smile enough during the photo op. So, Milton said, picking up his own menu. We are the janitors. I clean the pipes, you clean the politics. Effectively, Leona agreed. Though your pipes are likely more honest. The waiter arrived a human this time, with a sneer so practiced it must have been part of his training. He looked at Milton, then at Leona, his eyes lingering for a fraction of a second, too long on her small stature. May I bring a booster seat for the lady? The waiter asked. The politeness was a thin veneer over deep contempt. Milton saw Leona's hand tighten on her napkin. It was a micro-reaction, barely visible, but he saw it. Before Leona could speak, Milton closed his menu with a sharp snap. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hum of the restaurant. The lady, Milton said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the rough, grinding growl of a man who shouted over industrial turbines for a living. Does not require a booster seat. She requires the vintage ether wine the 2012 vintage brought immediately. And if you look at her like she is a piece of furniture again, I will go down to the environmental maintenance access panel on this floor and reverse the pressure flow in the guest restrooms. Do you understand the physics of what happens when a vacuum toilet reverses, son? The waiter went pale. The sneer vanished, replaced by the primal fear of plumbing disasters. Yes, sir. Immediately, sir. The waiter scurried away. Milton exhaled and looked back at Leona. She was staring at him. The weariness was gone, replaced by something sharp and curious. That was unnecessary, she said. I can fight my own battles. I know, Milton said, but I'm the one getting paid 3,000 credits to be here. I figure I should earn my keep by being a little bit of an asshole. Just to the right people. Leona held his gaze for a long moment. Then the corners of her lips curled up. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a real one, showing small, pearl-white teeth. The 2012 vintage is 400 credits a glass, she noted. Put it on my tab, Milton said recklessly. I'm feeling solvent tonight. The dinner did not go as Cassian Dorn had scripted. There were no awkward silences. There was no forced conversation about the weather. Instead, there was a debate about the efficiency of the station's hydroponic gardens versus traditional soil farming. Leona argued with the ferocity of an academic, her hands moving in sharp, precise gestures. Milton countered with the stubborn practicality of a man who had actually had to fix the irrigation pumps when they clogged with algae. They ate dishes that Milton couldn't pronounce, translucent strips of void fish that melted on the tongue, and vegetables that tasted like sunlight. So, Leona said as the plates were cleared. The sister. Is she the only family? The only family that counts, Milton said. Our parents were miners on an asteroid belt. They died when a compression seal failed. I was 12. She was 6. I raised her in the transit hubs. That explains the protective streak, Leona observed, and the willingness to sell your soul for 3,000 credits. It wasn't much of a soul to begin with, Milton shrugged. It's got some dents in it. We all have dents, Milton, Leona said quietly. She touched the side of her face where the Orolith skin met the cybernetic jack behind her ear. My people. We are a hive mind mostly. We share emotions, thoughts, sensations. It is called the choir. But microforms, our neural pathways are too narrow. We cannot connect to the choir. We are deaf to our own species. Isolated. Milton stopped drinking his wine. That sounds lonely. It is silent, Leona corrected. But silence allows you to hear things others miss. The humans here, they treat me like a child because I am small. My own people treat me like a ghost because I am silent. I suppose that is why I became a diplomat. I am the only one who has to use words to explain how I feel. You use them well, Milton said. Thank you, she looked at him. And you, Milton. You are not part of a hive mind, but you seem just as isolated. You walk into a room and apologize for taking up space. Habit, Milton said. When you spend your life in the maintenance shafts, you learn to be invisible. People don't like seeing the mechanics of their world. They just want the magic to work. I see you, Leona said. It was a simple sentence, 3 words. But they hit Milton harder than the gravity of the planet below. The check arrived on a silver platter. The total was astronomical. It was more than Milton made in 2 months. Leona reached for her purse. I will handle this. It is the least I can do for the entertainment. Milton's hand shot out and covered the bill. His skin was rough and scarred against the smooth silver. No, he said. Milton, Leona warned. Do not be foolish. You need the money. I do, Milton said. He pulled out his battered credit chip. I really do. But if I let you pay for this after I came here to trick you, then I am exactly what Cassian thinks I am. Just a thing to be bought. He looked at her, his eyes pleading. Let me buy you dinner, Leona. Just dinner. No strings, no jobs. Just a man buying dinner for a woman he respects. Leona withdrew her hand. She looked at him with a strange expression, a mixture of confusion and respect. You are a stubborn man, Milton. It's the only quality I have in abundance. He scanned his chip. The device beeped a warning about overdraft limits, but the transaction went through. He was now in debt. Deep debt. They walked out of the restaurant together. The corridor was quieter now. The artificial night cycle of the station had dimmed the lights to a soft amber. At the entrance to the transit lifts, they stopped. Well, Milton said, shoving his hands into his pockets. I suppose this is where I vanish back into the vents. Leona looked up at him. What will you do about the sister? I'll figure it out, Milton said. His voice was steady, though his heart was hammering. I'll take double shifts. I'll sell the rest of my kidney function. I don't know. But I won't use that money. He pulled out his communicator. He navigated to the encrypted message from the broker. Mission status, the text read. Milton typed mission failed. Target incompatible. Deal terminated. He hit send. Then he blocked the number. Goodbye, Leona, Milton said. Thank you for not throwing the wine. Goodbye, Milton, Leona said. She did not smile, but her eyes were warm. And thank you for the vintage. He stepped into the lift. As the doors closed, cutting off the sight of the small golden woman standing against the backdrop of the stars, Milton felt a terrifying lightness in his chest. He was broke. He was screwed. He was arguably in the worst position of his life. But for the first time in 10 years, he felt clean. High above in the penthouse spire of the Dorn Corporation HQ, the air was cold. Cassian Dorn stood by the window. He was a man of sharp angles and expensive tailoring. He held a glass of water, staring at his reflection in the dark pane. His personal assistant, a nervous young man with a datapad, cleared his throat. Sir, the assistant said, we received a notification from the broker. The operative Milton canceled the contract. Cassian did not turn around. Canceled. Yes, sir. He refused payment. He cited incompatibility. Cassian's grip on the glass tightened. Did the date end early? No, sir. Surveillance shows they remained at the table for 2 hours and 14 minutes. They consumed 3 courses. And Milton paid the bill. Cassian turned slowly. His face was a mask of serene, terrifying calm. He paid. Yes, sir. He overdrafted his personal account to do so. Cassian set the glass down on his mahogany desk. The sound of the glass hitting the wood was the only noise in the massive room. He had expected Milton to fail. He had expected Milton to succeed. He had expected greed, incompetence, clumsiness, or fear. He had not expected dignity. To a man like Cassian, whose power relied on the absolute certainty that every person had a price, Milton's action was not just an annoyance. It was an insult. It was a chaotic variable introduced into a perfect equation. A sewer rat had sat at his table and dared to act like a king. He thinks he can buy his pride back with my sister's time, Cassian said softly. Sir, it's offensive, Cassian said. He walked over to the wall screen and brought up Milton's file. The grainy ID photo of the engineer stared back, tired, rough, unassuming. He refused 3,000 credits, Cassian mused. That means he thinks his integrity is worth more than that. I am curious to see what the actual market value of his life is. Cassian tapped the screen, highlighting the section labeled Medical Debts. Contact the medical board, Cassian ordered. And get me the oversight roster for the lower grid maintenance crews. If Milton wants to be a hero, let's see how heavy a hero's burden can get. Yes, sir, the assistant said, backing out of the room. Cassian looked back at the city lights below. You should have taken the money, little man, he whispered to the void. Now you're going to pay with everything else. The heat in the lower maintenance sectors of Meridian Crown was not merely a temperature. It was a physical weight pressing down on the lungs with the scent of recycled ozone and burning lubricant. Here, far beneath the crystalline floors of the Celestia restaurant, the station did not sparkle. It groaned. Milton wiped a slurry of grease and condensation from his forehead with the back of a glove that had not been clean in 6 years. He was currently wedged inside the primary ventilation shaft of Sector 4, a narrow throat of metal that fed breathable air to the residential blocks of the dock workers. The turbine in front of him was screaming a high-pitched mechanical wail, indicating a misalignment in the magnetic bearings. To the people living in the apartments above, it was an annoyance. To Milton, it was a ticking bomb. If that bearing seized, the back pressure would blow out the filtration units, and 3,000 people would be breathing raw exhaust from the fusion drives within 20 minutes. "You look like you are trying to strangle that turbine, Milton," a voice crackled over his headset. It was Juno Hale. Juno was currently 3 levels up, monitoring the pressure gauges. She was a woman made of sharp angles, and even sharper sarcasm, the only other person on the crew who treated the station's machinery with something resembling religious reverence. "It is trying to strangle me first," Milton grunted, wrenching a stabilizer bolt a quarter turn to the left. "The lateral stress is off by 12%. Someone bypassed the safety protocols to run it at overdrive." "Management wanted better airflow for the VIP inspection yesterday," Juno replied, her voice dry. "They cranked it up so the corridors wouldn't smell like boiled cabbage and regret. Now we pay the price." Milton finally felt the locking mechanism click. The screaming whine of the turbine dropped to a manageable hum. He exhaled, slumping against the curved wall of the shaft. "Stable," he said. "Good," Juno said. "Because you have a call. External line. Priority tag." Milton's stomach tightened. He knew what that tag meant. It was the only entity that called him with priority status. "Patch it through." He stayed in the dark shaft, the metal vibrating against his spine. The voice that filled his ear was synthetic, polite, and utterly terrifying. "Greeting, Mr. Milton. This is a courtesy notification from the Asclepius Medical Trust. This is a reminder that the grace period for patient ID 49 Alpha subject name, Alara, concludes in 72 hours. The outstanding balance for the upcoming treatment cycle is 3,400 credits. Please ensure payment is cleared before the deadline to prevent automatic suspension of life support protocols. Have a pleasant cycle." The line went dead. 72 hours. Milton closed his eyes. The darkness of the shaft felt suffocating. He had refused Cassian's money. He had walked away with his pride intact, and now his pride was sitting on his chest, heavy enough to crush his ribs. He had worked 4 double shifts in a row. He had taken the hazard pay jobs that even the droids refused. He had managed to scrape together 800 credits. It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. "Milton," Juno's voice returned softer this time. "You okay down there? Your biometrics just spiked." "I am fine," Milton lied, forcing his voice to be steady. "Just the heat. I am coming up." He crawled out of the access hatch, his knees aching. The corridor outside was bathed in the harsh yellow glow of the sodium dock lights. This was his world. No glass floors, no star views. Just yellow light, gray metal, and the constant rhythmic thud of docking clamps. The dockside community clinic sat at the edge of the shipping yards, sandwiched between a warehouse storing volatile fuels and a bar that served engine coolant as a beverage. It was a place of last resort, funded by scraps of charity and staffed by idealists who had not yet been crushed by the system. Milton arrived there 2 hours after his shift carrying a heavy tool bag. He was not there to visit Alara. She was housed in the high-security stasis wards uptown, where the equipment was expensive and the rent was lethal. He was here because the clinic administrator, an overworked man named Dr. Aris, paid under the table for equipment repairs. The waiting room was a chaotic sea of species. Dock workers with crushed limbs, refugees with respiratory infections from the lower atmosphere, and street kids with neon burns. The air smelled of antiseptic and unwashed bodies. "The bioscanner is down again, Milton," Dr. Aris shouted from behind the triage desk, waving a datapad frantically. "I have a queue of 20 people, and I cannot tell if they have the flu or a parasite that eats livers." "I am on it," Milton said, heading toward the imaging bay. He pushed through the plastic curtains into the cramped examination room. The bioscanner, a relic that looked like it belonged in a museum, was sparking intermittently. And standing next to it, calming a terrified child with 4 arms, was Leona. Milton stopped dead in his tracks. She looked different. Gone was the shimmering evening gown from Celestia. She was wearing a utilitarian medical vest over a gray jumpsuit, her fiber-optic white hair tied back in a severe knot. She looked tired. There were smudges of dark fluid on her sleeve. But when she looked up and saw him, her eyes, those deep, pupilless emerald pools, widened. "Milton." "Leona." Milton gripped the strap of his tool bag. "What are you doing here?" "This isn't exactly the diplomatic quarter." "I volunteer here twice a week," Leona said, turning back to the child and pressing a soothing hypospray against the girl's arm. "The council requires us to have community engagement hours. Most of my colleagues choose the Opera House Board or the Botanical Garden Committee. I chose this." She finished with the patient, handing the child a small, glowing sticker. The girl scampered off her 4 arms, waving happily. Leona wiped her hands on a rag and turned to face him fully. "And are you stalking me? Or is the ventilation in here also about to explode?" "The scanner," Milton said, gesturing vaguely at the sparking machine. "I fix things for Aris. He pays in cash." Leona leaned against the exam table. In the harsh, flickering light of the clinic, she looked less like a porcelain doll and more like something forged from steel and starlight. The contrast between her delicate microform frame and the grime of the room was jarring, yet she seemed completely at ease. "Cash," she repeated. "Right. The debt." Before Milton could answer, his communicator buzzed again. He had forgotten to silence it. The external speaker, damaged from the heat in the shaft earlier, crackled loudly. "Final notice," the synthetic voice blared loud enough to be heard over the hum of the ventilation. "Payment of 3,400 credits required within 48 hours to maintain patient stability." Silence filled the small room. The spark from the scanner snapped loud and sharp. Milton scrambled to mute the device, his face burning, with a shame so hot it felt like a chemical peel. He had wanted to be the man who bought the vintage wine. He had wanted to be the man who had dignity. Now, she saw him as he was a man drowning, being screamed at by a machine in a closet. He did not look at her. He walked to the scanner and popped the access panel open with unnecessary force. "The power coupling is loose," he said to the machine. "I can bypass the regulator." "Milton," Leona said. "It will take 20 minutes, he continued, talking faster. "I just need to splice the wire. It is a simple fix." "Milton, look at me." He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Leona was not looking at him with pity. That was the first miracle. She was looking at him with a furrowed brow, a mixture of frustration and confusion. "You need 3,400 credits, she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Cassian offered you 3,000. With the bonus for a good performance, it would have been 4. "I know the math, Leona," Milton snapped. The exhaustion was fraying his temper. "I am an engineer. I know exactly what the numbers are." "Then why—" She took a step toward him. "I saw your face when that message played. You are terrified. You are desperate. So why, in the name of the stars, did you pay for my dinner and walk away from the money that would save your sister?" Milton dropped his wrench. It clanged on the metal floor. "Because if I took that money, Milton said, his voice trembling. I would have to tell her how I got it. Leona stopped. Alara, Milton said, looking at his hands. She is the only good thing I have ever done. I raised her to be honest. I raised her to believe that people matter more than convenience. If I saved her life by selling a woman out by becoming a tool for a man like Cassian Dorn to hurt someone, then I kill the brother she thinks she has. He looked up at Leona. I can save her body with that money, he whispered. But I would be bringing a stranger to her bedside. A stranger who sold his spine for a check. I cannot do that. I would rather work myself to death in these tunnels than look at her and know I am just another piece of Cassian's property. Leona stared at him. The clinic sounds, the coughing, the crying babies, the shouting of Dr. Eris seemed to fade away. She saw it then. The weapon he carried. It wasn't charisma, and it wasn't power. It was a terrifying, unshakable solidity. In a world where everyone on Meridian Crown was fluid, changing faces, changing morals, changing loyalties for the highest bid, Milton was a rock. Leona let out a long breath. She reached up and touched the metallic interface behind her ear, a nervous habit. You are a fool, she said softly. A magnificent, catastrophic fool. I have been told that, Milton said, bending down to pick up his wrench. My people, Leona began, her voice shifting, becoming lower, more intimate. The Orolith. We value symmetry. We value size. To be large is to be capable of holding the resonance of the choir, our telepathic web. When I was born this size, she gestured to her small frame. They called it a translation error, a genetic stutter. She hopped up onto the exam table, her legs dangling, not touching the floor. My parents were wealthy. They bought me a commission in the diplomatic corps because it was the only place where being small and non-threatening was an asset. I am a novelty, Milton. I am the cute little alien girl that warlords like to explain things to. They lower their guard because they cannot imagine a creature this size could be dangerous. She looked at him, her eyes fierce. I have spent my life being treated as a decorative object, and when I sat at that table with you, I expected you to be just another person using me. When you refused the money, when you treated me as a sovereign equal. She slid off the table and walked over to him. She was so short she had to tilt her head back significantly to look him in the eye. You gave me back something I did not know I had lost, she said. You treated me like a human, or whatever the Orolith equivalent is, a person. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a data chip. I cannot give you money, she said. You are too stubborn to take it, and I suspect it would insult you. But I can give you this. Milton took the chip. What is it? It is the legal code for biomedical debt restructuring, Leona said. I am a diplomat, Milton. I read treaties for fun. I looked at your sister's contract. There is a clause, paragraph 84, regarding essential infrastructure personnel. If you can prove your work is vital to the station's safety, they cannot suspend treatment. They have to grant a deferment. Milton stared at the chip. Vital personnel, I am a grease monkey. You just told me you stopped a turbine from poisoning 3,000 people, Leona said dryly. If that is not vital, I do not know what is. We just need to prove it. And, she hesitated. I need someone to look at the wiring in my apartment. The climate control is stuck on Arctic, and the building superintendent ignores my calls. Milton smiled. It was a tired smile, but it reached his eyes. I can fix a heater, he said. Good, Leona said. Then get that scanner working. We have work to do. The next 2 weeks became a blur of exhausted productivity. They fell into a rhythm that was purely pragmatic, yet infinitely more intimate than any candlelit dinner. Milton would finish his shift at the docks, smelling of ozone and fatigue, and meet Leona at the clinic or her apartment. He fixed things. He repaired the clinic's sterilization field. He rewired Leona's security grid, which he discovered had been bugged by 3 different corporate rivals. He crushed the bugs with his pliers with immense satisfaction. He calibrated her nutrient synthesizer, so it actually produced food that tasted like food. In return, Leona became his legal battering ram. She sat on his floor, surrounded by holographic projections of maritime law and medical statutes, translating the dense legalese into plain speech. "Here," she would say, pointing a slender finger at a floating paragraph. "They are trying to claim interest on the interest. That is illegal under the Meridian Charter of 2042. We can contest this. They ate takeout noodles, sitting on crates. They drank cheap caffeine stimulants. They argued. You cannot use a hyperspanner on a delicate circuit, Milton, you brute," she would scold. "I can if I ask it nicely," he would retort, and then prove her wrong by making the circuit sing. Juno Hale, who had taken to lurking around the clinic to make sure Milton didn't electrocute himself, watched them with amusement. "You two are disgusting," Juno said one evening, leaning against the doorframe as Milton and Leona debated the ethics of AI rights while fixing a toaster. "It is like watching 2 calculators try to mate." "Go away, Juno," Milton grunted from under the table. "He likes you," Juno said to Leona, ignoring him. "He usually only argues with machines." "Machines are more logical," Leona said, but she was smiling as she passed Milton a screwdriver, without him even asking for it. But the bubble of their small, defiant happiness could not hold against the pressure of the outside world forever. It started subtly, a roster change. Milton arrived at the station hub to find his schedule altered. He had been pulled from the internal ventilation crew and reassigned to the hull integrity team. The hull integrity team, or the suicide squad, as the workers called it, was responsible for repairing the exterior blast shields, while the station was moving through high radiation zones. It was grueling, dangerous work that paid only marginally better, but carried a 30% casualty rate over 5 years. "Management says it is a randomized rotation," the shift supervisor said, refusing to meet Milton's eyes. "Nothing I can do." Milton knew better. This was Cassian. Cassian Dorn did not send thugs to break your legs. That was crude. Cassian Dorn rearranged the world around you until you broke your own legs trying to navigate it. He was isolating Milton, draining his energy, putting him in a position where a single slip-up would be fatal. That night, as Milton sat in Leona's apartment too exhausted to even lift his arm to eat, his communicator chimed. It was not a debt collector. It was a private frequency. A hologram shimmered into existence. It was a woman who looked like Cassian, but with softer eyes, and a mouth that seemed perpetually sad. Seren Dorn. "Mr. Milton," Seren said. Her image was grainy, indicating a heavily encrypted line. "And Leona. I know you are there." Leona stiffened, setting down her tea. Seren. "I am brief," Seren said. "I am sorry. The dinner, I truly thought I wanted you to find a friend, Leona. I did not know Cassian would turn it into a test of loyalty." "He failed the test," Leona said coldly. "Or rather, the test failed him." "Cassian is angry," Seren warned. "Not the shouting kind. The quiet kind. He feels his property has been mishandled. Milton, the reassignment to the hull team is just the beginning. He wants you to quit. He wants you to come crawling back and ask for the money. If you do that, he wins. He proves that everyone breaks." "I am not breaking," Milton said, his voice raspy from the radiation meds he had to take for the new shift. "Then be careful," Seren said. "He is looking for a legal pretext. He is digging into the archives. I cannot stop him. I am just the sister who arranges the flowers, but I can warn you. Watch the sky." The hologram faded. "She is afraid of him," Leona murmured. "She is the older sibling, technically the heir, but she is terrified of him." "We need to speed up the debt deferment," Milton said, standing up despite the ache in his bones. "If I can get the medical board to lock my status, Cassian cannot touch my sister. I filed the papers this morning, Leona said. But the bureaucracy is slow. We need time. They did not get time. 3 days later, Milton and Leona were at the clinic. It was late. The rain was lashing against the metal roof of the module. Milton was finishing the final calibration on the bioscanner. It was humming perfectly now, a testament to his stubborn skill. Done, he said, wiping his hands. It will spot a parasite at 50 meters, Leona smiled. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to say something about how amazing he was, or perhaps to suggest they finally go get a real dinner. The door to the clinic hissed open. It wasn't a patient. A courier drone hovered into the room. It was sleek black and bore the golden crest of the Meridian Council. It bypassed the reception desk and floated directly to Leona. Leona of House Orlith, the drone's voice was mechanical and loud. Priority delivery. A cylinder of heavy synthetic parchment extended from the drone's chassis. Leona's face went pale. The gold in her skin seemed to drain away, leaving her looking gray and fragile. No, she whispered. What is it? Milton stepped forward, placing himself between the drone and her. Take it, the drone commanded. Leona reached out with a trembling hand and took the cylinder. The drone retracted its arm and hovered, recording. She unrolled the document. It was not a digital pad. It was physical paper, heavy and textured, a sign of archaic, absolute legal weight. It is a claim charter, Leona said, her voice barely audible. What does that mean? Milton asked. Leona looked up at him, and for the first time since the restaurant, she looked terrified. It is an ancient maritime law revived by the corporation. It states that if a diplomatic liaison is deemed compromised or acting against the interests of the stability of the port, their sponsorship can be revoked. She read further down the document. Cassian has filed a motion. He claims that my association with a debt-ridden element of the lower grid is creating a security risk. He is invoking the honor clause. She looked at Milton, tears forming in her emerald eyes. The charter gives me a choice. I must return to the protection of the Dorn family patronage, which means I become their ward, effectively their prisoner, in a gilded cage cut off from my work from the world. Or, Milton demanded. Or what or? Leona said, the paper shaking in her hands. I am stripped of my diplomatic immunity. And if I am stripped of immunity, they can prosecute me for corporate espionage, for helping you read those legal files. She swallowed hard. And they will liquidate my assets to pay for the damages, and they will add your debt to my liability. Milton felt the room spin. Cassian had not just attacked him. He had weaponized Leona's kindness. He had found a way to threaten the one thing Leona had fought for, her independence. If I do not go back to him, Leona whispered, he destroys us both. He unplugs your sister, and he throws me in a detention cell. Milton looked at the drone, which was still watching them with its unblinking red eye. He looked at the heavy paper in Leona's small hands. He reached out and gently took the paper from her. He rolled it up. He wants a response, Milton asked the drone. Immediate compliance required, the drone whirred. Milton looked at Leona. The fear was there, yes. But beneath the fear he saw the anger. The same anger that had made her sit at that glass table and demand to be treated like a person. Tell Cassian Dorn, Milton said to the drone, his voice low and dangerous, that we acknowledge receipt. And tell him. He looked at Leona. She nodded, a tiny, imperceptible movement, but it was enough. Tell him we request a hearing, Milton said. Under the charter, the trial of the 3 doors, Leona gasped. Milton. No, that is madness. No one has invoked the 3 doors in a century. It is in the charter, isn't it? Milton asked. Yes, but... Then we do it, Milton said. He turned back to the drone. We challenge the claim. We will meet him at the charter hall. The drone paused, processing this unexpected input. "Challenge recorded," it said. "Prepare for adjudication." The drone spun and flew out into the rain. Milton turned to Leona. She was staring at him as if he had just grown wings. "Do you know what you just did?" she asked. "The three doors." "It is not a court case, Milton. It is a gauntlet. It is designed to break people." "He thinks I am a tool," Milton said, picking up his tool bag. He felt a strange calm settling over him, the calm of a man who finally knows exactly which wire to cut. "He thinks you are a pet. He is about to find out that we are something else entirely." He took her hand. It was cold, but her grip was strong. "We are the people who keep his world running," Milton said. "Let's go show him what happens when we stop." The charter hall was not designed to make a human feel significant. It was a cavernous expanse of black marble and acoustically dampened voids, located in the absolute gravitational center of Meridian Crown. The ceiling was a holographic projection of the Galactic Law Codex scrolling endlessly, in 10,000 languages, a waterfall of regulations that could drown a man before he even opened his mouth. Milton stood in the center of the circle of adjudication. He wore his best work jumpsuit cleaned and pressed, but the grease stains on the cuffs were stubborn. Beside him, Leona stood tall, though she barely reached his ribcage. She was dressed in the formal white robes of a petitioner, her aurolith skin dull and gray under the harsh judgment lights. Across from them, standing on a raised dais that looked suspiciously like a throne, was Cassian Dorn. Cassian did not look like a villain. He looked like the solution to a problem you did not know you had. He wore a suit, cut from midnight blue silk, that seemed to absorb the light around him, and his smile was a masterpiece of polite condescension. "This is unnecessary theater," Cassian said. His voice was amplified by the room's acoustics, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are simply correcting an administrative error. The asset known as Leona has strayed from her designated patronage. I am here to facilitate her safe return." "I am not an asset," Leona said. Her voice trembled, but she held her chin high. "And I am not lost," Cassian sighed, a sound of genuine regret. He stepped down from the dais, moving with the fluid grace of a predator that had never known hunger. He stopped 5 feet from Milton, ignoring him entirely to focus on Leona. "My dear," Cassian said softly, "you are confused. You have been spending time with staff. It has affected your perspective. You are a microform. You require specific environmental and social structures to thrive, structures that only the Dorn family can provide." He finally turned his eyes to Milton. It was like being looked at by a scanner evaluating scrap metal. "And you," Cassian said. "The mechanic. I must applaud you, Mr. Milton. Most hirelings take the money and run. You took the money, developed a conscience, and then decided to steal the merchandise. It is a bold business strategy, if somewhat suicidal." "I did not take your money," Milton said. His voice was rough, scraping against the polished perfection of the room. "And she is not merchandise." "Everything is merchandise," Cassian corrected gently. "Some items just have more expensive maintenance contracts." He turned to the shadowed figure sitting high above them in the arbiter's seat, a synthetic intelligence encased in a pillar of bronze. "Arbiter, I move for immediate summary judgment. The defendant has no legal standing. He is a third-party contractor interfering with a proprietary bond." Leona stepped forward. "I will go," she whispered to Cassian, low enough that the mics barely caught it. "Leave him out of this. Drop the debt leverage against him and I will sign the renewal of patronage." "I will come back." Milton grabbed her arm. It was a violation of protocol, but he did not care. "No. Milton," she hissed. "You cannot win this. He has the law. He has the money. He will crush you just to make a point. You are not a fee, Milton said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. You are not a fine I pay to get out of trouble. I am not trading you. Touching, Cassian drawled, but irrelevant. Is it? The voice came from the shadows near the entrance. Vera Kint stepped into the light. She was a saurian, a tall reptilian humanoid, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that blinked sideways. She wore the crimson sash of a charter litigator. Dr. Vera Kint, Cassian said, his smile tightening by a fraction of a millimeter. I was not aware the lower decks could afford your hourly rate. They cannot, Vara said, her voice a dry rasp. But I have a pro bono quota to fill, and I despise bullies who use the charter as a bludgeon. She walked to the center of the circle, her claws clicking on the marble. Arbiter, my client invokes the trial of the three doors. A murmur ran through the few observers in the gallery. Even Cassian looked surprised. The three doors, Cassian laughed. That is a relic, a dispute resolution mechanism from the first founding of the station. It hasn't been used in 80 years. It is still active law, Vera said, tapping a claw against a holographic slate. Article 7, Section 9. In disputes regarding the ownership of sentient intent, the challenger may request a trial by ordeal. 3 challenges, 3 victories. If the challenger wins, the claim is nullified. Cassian looked at Milton. He saw a man with frayed cuffs and tired eyes. He saw a man who fixed toilets and air ducts. He saw a victim. Very well, Cassian said, adjusting his cufflinks. I accept. It will be amusing to watch him fail. The terms are set, the arbiter's synthetic voice boomed. Cassian Dorn as the claimant, you shall set the nature of the obstacles. However, they must adhere to the categories of the charter resource, intellect, and value. Cassian smiled. It was a smile that promised pain without blood. For the first door, Cassian said, pacing around Milton, we shall test resource. You claim to be worthy of standing beside a diplomat. Then show me you can navigate the world of influence. He stopped and looked at Milton. Bring me a resonance shard. Leona gasped. That is impossible. Shards are contraband. They are remnants of the pre-collapse drive technology. Possession is a felony. Procurement is the challenge, Cassian said smoothly. If he cannot find one within 2 hours, he forfeits. And if he gets arrested trying well, that also solves my problem. The first door. The wrong man for the right job. 2 hours. Milton and Leona stood outside the hall. The clock on Milton's retina display was already ticking down. We should run, Leona said, pacing frantically. We can steal a shuttle. I know the override codes for the diplomatic hangars. And where? Milton asked. Cassian controls the shipping lanes. He would shoot us down and call it a tragic accident. He wiped sweat from his forehead. A resonance shard. I have seen them in tech manuals. They react to the phenomenon known as the choir. But where do we find one in a city of rules? The black market, Leona suggested. But we have no money. No, Milton said. Not the black market. The gray market. He snapped his fingers. Ambassador Torgal. Torgal. Leona stared at him. The representative of the Amorphous Trade Federation. He eats people who bore him, Milton. Metaphorically. Sometimes. Literally. He also hates Cassian, Milton said. I fixed his humidifiers last month. He tipped me in illegal off-world chocolate. He likes chaos. They ran. They did not take the maglev. They took the service corridors, Milton, navigating the maze of pipes and conduits with an instinct born of 10 years in the dark. They burst into the diplomatic wing, bypassing security, by crawling through a ventilation duct that emptied out behind a velvet curtain in Torgal's receiving room. Ambassador Torgal was a large gelatinous entity contained within a pressurized envirosuit that looked like a deep-sea diving rig. He was lounging on a divan reinforced with steel beams, watching a holographic opera. You are early for the maintenance cycle, Torgal, burlesqued his voice, bubbling through a translator box. "And you have brought a snack. How thoughtful." "We need a resonance shard," Milton said, gasping for breath. "Right now." Torgal's single massive eye swiveled to look at him. "A shard? You ask for a piece of a dying star, little engineer. Why should I give you something that is worth more than your entire life's earnings?" "Because Cassian Dorn bet that I couldn't get one," Milton said. Torgal paused. The fluid in his suit bubbled. "Cassian. That preening peacock. He is trying to crush you, isn't he?" "Yes," Milton said. "Boring," Torgal sighed. "The rich crushing the poor is the oldest story in the galaxy. Give me something new. Give me a truth that makes me less bored, and I might consider it." Leona stepped forward, but Milton held up a hand. "The truth," Milton said, stepping toward the massive alien. "The truth is that I was hired to break her heart." Torgal's eyes widened. Leona went still. "I was a mercenary," Milton continued, his voice steady. "Cassian paid me to humiliate her, to be the wrong man. I needed the money. I was going to do it. I sat at that table and I looked at her, and I saw a payout." "And?" Torgal asked, leaning forward. "And I realized that being the wrong man was easy," Milton said. "Being a decent man was the hardest thing I had ever done. I am terrified, Ambassador. I am a grease monkey fighting a billionaire. I should have taken the money. But I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I found something I couldn't put a price tag on." He looked at Leona, then back at Torgal. "I am not a hero. I am just a guy who realized he was the villain and decided to quit the role halfway through the play." Torgal stared at him for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then a low rumbling sound filled the room. The ambassador was laughing. "A villain who quit," Torgal wheezed. "Delicious. Cassian expects you to be noble or clever. He does not expect you to be reformed." Torgal reached into the folds of his suit and pulled out a small, jagged crystal. It pulsed with a faint violet light and emitted a low hum that seemed to vibrate in Milton's teeth. "This is a shard," Torgal said. "It sings when the choir is near. Be careful, little engineer. It listens." He tossed it. Milton caught it. It was cold, colder than ice. "Go," Torgal said. "And when you see Cassian, tell him his opera is terrible." The second door. The hive and the human. They returned to the charter hall with 3 minutes to spare. Cassian's face remained impassive when Milton produced the shard, but his eyes narrowed. "Look," Cassian dismissed. "A scavenger finding a shiny rock. Let us test something that cannot be scavenged. Intellect." The floor of the hall shifted. A holographic matrix rose from the ground, a swirling, chaotic storm of data points, encryption keys, and logic gates. It was a visual representation of a security override for a planetary shield. "This," Cassian said, "is a recursive cipher designed by the Oralith High Guard. It requires parallel processing. An Oralith mind can split into 4 distinct cognitive streams to solve the layers simultaneously. A human mind is linear. You cannot solve it alone. You will time out before you even breach the first firewall." He gestured to the timer. 1 hour. Leona looked at the matrix. "He is right. This requires the choir, or at least a microform adaptation of it. Milton, you cannot do this. Your brain isn't wired for it." Milton looked at the swirling data. It was true. If he tried to solve AB, would reset. If he solved BC, and D would lock. It was designed for a species that could think in 4 directions at once. "I am not an Oralith," Milton said. He tapped his communicator. "But I am an engineer, and engineers do not work alone." "External assistance is forbidden," the Arbiter boomed. "Objection," Varakint interjected smoothly. "The challenge specifies intellect. It does not specify that the intellect must be singular. Oralith used the choir a collective mind. If the test is designed for a collective, A human must be allowed to simulate one. The arbiter paused. Sustained. But the candidate must coordinate the effort personally. Milton grinned. He activated his headset. "Juno," he barked. "Wake up! I need you on Channel 1. "Milton," Juno's sleepy voice crackled. "It is 3 a.m, unless the station is on fire." "It is about to be. Get the schematic I am sending you. I need you to handle the logic gates on the red spectrum." "Dr. Eris," Milton switched channels. "I need you on Channel 2. You know biological algorithms. Look at the blue stream. Treat it like a viral propagation. Isolate the nodes." "What is this?" Eris asked, confused. "I am in the middle of a surgery." "The patient can wait 10 minutes. I need you." "Doc crew," Milton shouted into the open frequency for Sector 4. "Listen up, I need eyes on a structural pattern. Channel 3 and 4. If you see a prime number sequence, yell it out." Suddenly, Milton's headset was a cacophony of voices. It was messy. It was loud. It was chaotic. "I see a loop in the red sector," Juno shouted. "Isolating the blue node is a Fibonacci sequence," Eris yelled. "Hey, Milton, Channel 3 looks like a shift schedule for a cargo loader," a dock worker bellowed. Milton stood in the center of the hall, his eyes darting back and forth across the hologram. He was the conductor of a symphony of noise. "Juno, hold the red gate open. Eris, inject the code now. Sector 4, shift the prime sequence to the left." Cassian watched his arms crossed. He expected failure. He expected the human mind to buckle under the strain of coordinating so many inputs. But Milton was not trying to be an Orolith. He was being a human. He was using the oldest survival trait of his species, pack hunting. 3, 2, 1, mark, Milton shouted. 4 different voices shouted 4 different solutions at the exact same second. The holographic matrix shuddered. The red, blue, green, and yellow streams aligned perfectly. The cipher dissolved, replaced by a green light of completion. Milton fell to his knees, gasping for air. His head pounded. "Solved," the arbiter announced. Cassian's calm facade cracked. A vein pulsed in his temple. "Crude," Cassian spat. "You brute-forced an elegant puzzle with a mob." "It worked," Milton wheezed, standing up. "That is the only thing that matters in engineering." "Does it work?" The third door. "The value of nothing enough," Cassian said. His voice was no longer smooth. It was cold, hard, and dangerous. "You have scavenged. You have swarmed. Now let us see if you can sacrifice." The third door did not open. Instead, a set of scales rose from the floor. They were made of ancient gold, etched with the symbols of commerce and soul. "The third challenge is value," Cassian announced. "The charter demands that to prove your worthiness to hold a bond, you must stake something of equal or greater value to the claim." He pointed to Leona. "I value her as a strategic asset, a diplomatic key, and a family property. Her worth is estimated at 50 million credits in potential trade revenue alone. To win, you must place something on that scale that the arbiter deems more valuable than 50 million credits." Cassian smiled, and this time it was triumphant. "You have no money, Milton. You have a debt. You have a sister in a coma. You have a toolkit. Even if you put your own life on that scale, the actuarial value of a maintenance worker is what 200,000 credits over a lifetime." He leaned in close. "You cannot win this little man. You have nothing." Leona looked at Milton. Her eyes were filled with tears. "He is right. Milton, stop. Give up. I will go with him. Do not humiliate yourself further." Milton looked at the scales. He looked at Cassian. Then he looked at Vera Kint. The lizard lawyer gave him a slow, subtle nod. Milton walked to the scale. He reached into his pocket. Cassian watched expectantly. Was he going to put the shard there? A photo of his sister Milton pulled his hand out. It was empty. He placed his open, empty hand on the scale. "I offer this," Milton said. "Nothing," Cassian laughed. You offer air. I offer my refusal, Milton said clearly. The room went silent. Explain, the Arbiter commanded. Milton turned to face the bronze pillar. Cassian argues that value is quantification, credits, assets, potential revenue. He thinks Leona is valuable because of what she can do for him. He thinks I am worthless because I have no assets. Milton looked at Leona. But the charter asks for the most valuable thing. My most valuable possession is not something I hold. It is something I do. He took a breath. It is my choice to love my family, both the one I was born with and the one I found. I worked in the dark for 10 years to keep my sister alive, not because she generates revenue, but because she is my sister. That love has no price. It cannot be bought. It cannot be sold. And therefore, he looked at Cassian. It cannot be placed on a scale. If I were to trade my loyalty, my love, or my sister's safety to win this trial, I would be converting them into a currency. I would be devaluing them to the level of Cassian's world. The moment I put them on the scale, they become worthless. Milton turned back to the Arbiter. I offer my refusal to trade. I argue that the only thing more valuable than 50 million credits is the thing that cannot be traded for 50 million credits. By keeping my hand empty, I am holding on to the only thing in this room that has infinite value, my humanity. Cassian sneered. Sophistry word games, Arbiter, he is mocking the court. He offers nothing. The bronze pillar hummed. The lights in the room flickered. The synthetic intelligence was processing a logic loop that dated back to the founding philosophers of the station. Value is determined by scarcity, the Arbiter thought, or calculated. That which can be exchanged is finite. That which cannot be exchanged is infinite. The logic holds, the Arbiter's voice shook the room. Cassian froze. The claimant offers finite assets, the Arbiter continued. The challenger offers a non-fungible abstract concept of devotion. Under Charter Law subsection Alpha, the infinite outweighs the finite. The scale tipped. Not physically, it was balanced by gravity, but the holographic indicator above it swung violently to Milton's side. Judgment for the challenger, the Arbiter declared. The claim is nullified. Leona of Orolith is free of patronage bonds. Cassian stood there frozen. His face was a mask of shock. He had not lost a battle of strength. He had not lost a battle of wits. He had lost a battle of definition. He had been beaten by a janitor who argued that love was heavier than gold. Milton lowered his hand. He felt weak. His knees were shaking. Leona ran to him. She did not care about the decorum of the court. She slammed into him, burying her face in his chest, her small frame shaking with sobs. "You idiot!" she cried. "You brilliant, absolute idiot!" Milton wrapped his arms around her. He looked over her head at Cassian. Cassian was not looking at the Arbiter. He was looking at Milton. The smooth corporate mask was gone. The condescending amusement was gone. In its place was something raw, ugly, and very, very human. Hatred. Cassian's eyes were cold fire. He adjusted his cuffs, his movements stiff and jerky. "You think you have won," Cassian said. His voice was low, devoid of amplification, but it carried across the silence. "You won a game, Milton. You won a debate in a dusty hall." He turned to leave his entourage, scrambling to keep up. At the door, he paused. "But you still have to live on my station. You still have to breathe my air. And accidents happen in the lower grids every day." He walked out. Milton held Leona tighter. He knew it wasn't over. In fact, he knew with a terrifying certainty that the real war had just begun. "We need to go," Varakint said, closing her holographic files. "Cassian is a man who follows the rules only until they stop working for him. Now that the law has failed him, he will turn to physics." "Physics?" Leona asked, wiping her eyes. "Yes," Vera said grimly. The physics of fire pressure and unfortunate structural failures. Milton looked at the resonance shard still clutched in his hand. It was vibrating again, warmer this time. And for a second, just a second, he thought he heard something in the back of his mind. Not a voice, not a thought. A note. A single clear note of a song that was waiting to be sung. "Let's go," Milton said. "We have work to do." The victory in the charter hall tasted like ash before Milton even left the building. The legal win was absolute. The arbiter had ruled in their favor, the debt transfer was nullified, and Leona was technically a free agent. But as they stepped out of the black marble sanctuary of the law and back into the humming neon-lit reality of Meridian Crown, the true nature of Cassian Dorn's war became immediately apparent. It started with a cup of coffee. Milton stopped at a kiosk in the transit hub, his hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the trial. He tapped his wrist link against the payment pad for a double-shot stimulant. The pad flashed a harsh, angry crimson. Transaction denied. "That is odd," Milton muttered, tapping it again. "Account frozen. Pending investigation for industrial sabotage." Sabotage. Milton stared at the screen. Beside him, Leona checked her own datapad. Her face, usually a mask of diplomatic composure, crumpled slightly. "My diplomatic credentials," she said, her voice tight. "They have been suspended. The council has placed me under administrative review due to concerns regarding mental stability and association with criminal elements." "I am the criminal element, I assume?" Milton asked dryly. "We both are," Leona said. She pointed to a large public news screen, hovering above the crowd. On the screen, a news anchor with perfectly sculpted hair was speaking in a grave tone. Behind him was a grainy, edited video of Milton working on a ventilation shaft, the footage manipulated to make it look like he was severing cables, rather than fixing them. "Reports coming in of a rogue engineer cell operating within the lower grid," the anchor said. "Sources close to the Dorn Corporation suggest these radical elements are responsible for the recent fluctuations in the life support grid. Citizens are advised to report any suspicious maintenance activity immediately." People in the transit hub were starting to look at them, not with the indifference of commuters, but with the suspicious, side-eyed glares of people who had been told to be afraid. "He is erasing us," Milton said, pulling up his hood. "He cannot own us, so he is making sure we cannot exist." "We need to get to the lower levels," Leona whispered. "My apartment is compromised. Your dorm is likely being watched." "The clinic," Milton said. "Dr. Eris owes me for the scanner, and he hates the news." They did not make it to the clinic. They were moving through the Sector 4 residential zone, a cramped, claustrophobic warren of metal housing units, stacked like shipping containers, when the world tilted. It began with a deep, subsonic thump, like a giant heart missing a beat. Then came the hiss, the terrifying, unmistakable shriek of a high-pressure seal failing. An alarm, blared raw and mechanical. "Warning. Atmospheric breach in Block 7. Fire suppression failure." Block 7 was 50 meters ahead of them. It was a housing unit for transient dock workers, families, children, the elderly, who could not afford the gravity tax of the upper levels. Smoke, thick and oily, began to pour from the ventilation grates. It smelled of burning plastic and ozone. "Block 7, Milton said. "That is where the main junction is." "Milton, no." Leona grabbed his arm. "We have to go. Security will be here in minutes. If they catch you." "If the main junction blows the fire doors lock automatically," Milton said, his eyes fixed on the smoke. "Those people cannot get out. The manual overrides are inside the ductwork." "You are a wanted man," Leona cried, her voice cracking. "You are not the station's keeper anymore." "I am always the keeper," Milton said. He looked at her, and for a second, the hard lines of his face softened. Go to the rendezvous point. Wait for me." He pulled his arm free and ran. He did not run away from the danger. He ran directly into the cloud of black smoke billowing from the corridor. Leona stood there frozen. Her logical, diplomatic mind screamed that this was suicide. It was irrational. It was exactly what Cassian wanted for Milton to play the hero and die in a tragic, preventable accident. But her heart, that strange, expanding organ that she was only just learning to listen to, felt a terror so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. "You stubborn human idiot!" she sobbed, and then she turned and ran after him. Inside Block 7, the heat was a physical blow. The air was a toxic soup of particulate matter. Visibility was less than 3 feet. Milton pulled his shirt up over his nose. He didn't need to see. He knew the ship. He knew the layout of the pipes like he knew the veins in his own hands. He could hear screaming, muffled, panicked voices trapped behind a blast door that had sealed shut to contain the fire. "Help! The panel is dead! Open the door!" Milton reached the control box next to the door. He ripped the cover off with his bare hands, ignoring the searing heat of the metal. The wires inside were fused a mess of melted copper. Sabotage. This wasn't an accident. The suppression system had been deliberately looped to overheat. "Stand back," Milton roared, though he doubted they could hear him. He reached into his tool belt, which he had never taken off even in court, and pulled out a heavy hydrospanner. He didn't try to fix the wires. There was no time. He jammed the spanner into the manual gear teeth of the door mechanism and heaved. He put his back into it. He pushed with everything he had, every ounce of frustration, every credit of debt, every second of humiliation he had suffered at the hands of men who lived in clean air. "Move!" he grunted, his muscles screaming. The door groaned. It slid open 3 inches. "Push!" Milton shouted to the people inside. Hands appeared in the gap, desperate, soot-stained hands. They pushed. Milton pulled. The door slid open a foot. A woman squeezed through, clutching a baby. Then a man coughing violently. Then 2 children. "Go toward the lift," Milton directed them, acting as a human shield against the sparks raining down from the ceiling. Leona appeared out of the smoke. She had a wet cloth pressed to her face. She didn't say a word. She grabbed a stumbling old man and guided him toward the exit. "Get out of here, Leona!" Milton shouted, coughing. "Shut up and work!" she yelled back. There was one more problem. The fire was feeding on the oxygen line. If Milton didn't cut the flow, the whole block would become a bomb. "I have to reach the valve," Milton said, looking up at the ceiling hatch. "It is too hot!" Leona screamed. Milton didn't listen. He scrambled up a maintenance ladder, disappearing into the ceiling crawlspace. For Leona, the next 2 minutes were an eternity. She stood in the corridor, her eyes stinging, listening to the roar of the fire and the clanking of metal above her. She imagined him burning. She imagined him suffocating. She imagined the silence that would follow. Then a loud clang. The hiss of the gas stopped. The roar of the fire died down, starved of its fuel. A moment later, Milton dropped from the hatch. He hit the floor hard, rolling to absorb the impact. His jumpsuit was scorched. His eyebrows were singed off. His skin was smeared with soot and blood. He looked up at her and grinned, his teeth white against the black mask of ash on his face. "Fixed it," he wheezed. Leona didn't smile. She walked over to him, grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined suit and shook him. "Do not," she hissed, tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks, cutting clean lines through the grime. "Do not ever do that to me again. Do you understand you are not allowed to die? I forbid it. It is against protocol." Milton blinked, surprised by the ferocity in her voice. He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I thought we broke the protocol," he said softly. Leona let out a choked sound that was half laugh, half sob, and buried her face in his shoulder. They stood there in the smoking corridor, holding each other up while the distant sirens of the official security forces finally began to wail. They found refuge in the back room of Juno Hale's workshop. It was a subterranean bunker, filled with cannibalized droid parts and illegal server racks. Juno looked at them with a mixture of horror and awe. She threw a medkit at Milton and a bottle of water at Leona. "You two are a disaster," Juno said, pacing the room. "You are all over the net. They are calling Milton the arsonist of Block 7. Cassian spun the story before the smoke even cleared. "He says you sabotaged the line to cause panic." "He did it," Milton said, wincing, as Dr. Eris, who had been summoned via a secure channel, applied a biogel to the burns on his arms. The wiring was fused. It was a remote overload. "We know," a new voice spoke from the shadows. Seren Dorn stepped forward. She looked out of place in the grease-stained workshop wearing a hooded cloak over her silk dress. But her face was pale and drawn. "Seren," Leona stood up. "How did you find us?" "I tracked the drone coverage," Seren said. "And I knew where I would go if I wanted to hide from my brother." She looked at Milton. "He sent me to deliver a message," Seren said. She pulled a small holographic projector from her pocket and set it on the table. Cassian's face appeared. He was sitting in his office calm, untouched perfect. "Congratulations on the rescue, Milton," the recording said. "Very heroic. But take a look at your bank account. Take a look at your sister's medical chart. Winning the game in the courtroom does not mean you win the life. I can burn this station down room by room, and they will blame you for every spark. Surrender, Leona. Confess to the sabotage. And I will let your sister live. You have 24 hours. The hologram flickered and died. Silence filled the room. The only sound was the hum of Juno's servers. "He is going to kill Alara," Milton said. His voice was hollow. "He will pull the plug and blame a power outage." "He won't," Seren said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were hard. "Because I am going to give you the codes to lock him out." Everyone turned to Seren. "You are betraying the family," Vorakint asked, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. The Saurian lawyer looked skeptical. "That is a death sentence in your circles." "He is a monster," Seren whispered. "I looked away when he rigged the markets. I looked away when he bribed the council. But burning down Block 7, there were children in there. I set up that housing project. It was my charity." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a data drive. "This contains the architecture of his private network. But be warned, there is something else in there. Something he is using to control the narrative." "The choir," Leona said. Seren nodded. "He calls it the resonance algorithm. But yes, it is the choir." Leona turned to the group. "The Auralith choir is not just telepathy. It is a shared emotional resonance. It is how we build consensus. It is beautiful. But Cassian has found a way to synthesize it." She picked up the resonance shard that Milton had placed on the table. The crystal was glowing with a pulsing violet rhythm. "He is using these shards," Leona explained, her voice shaking. "He has embedded them in the station's communication grid. He is not just broadcasting news. He is broadcasting an emotional carrier wave. Subliminal fear. Subliminal obedience. That is why the crowd turned on us so quickly. That is why no one questions his lies." "He is brainwashing the station," Juno asked, horrified. "He is harmonizing them," Leona corrected. "To his tune." Milton stared at the shard. He reached out his hand. "Don't touch it, Milton," Leona warned. "It interacts with neural pathways." "I have to know," Milton said. He touched the crystal. At first there was nothing, then a static hiss, and then a sound. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears. It was a sound he felt in the fillings of his teeth, in the titanium screws in his broken ankle, in the neural interface of his tool gloves. It was a song, a low, mournful digital dirge. But underneath the sadness, there was a pattern. Binary, logic, structure. 011 fear. 010 obey. I can hear it, Milton whispered. That is impossible, Vera Kent said. You are human. You lack the parietal lobe structure. I don't hear it in my brain, Milton said, his eyes widening. I hear it in the tech. My interface is picking up the signal. The choir is broadcasting on a frequency that machines understand. He looked at Juno. If it is a frequency, Milton said, a dangerous light entering his eyes, we can jam it. No, Juno said, her mind already racing, her fingers flying across a keyboard. Jamming it just creates silence. If we want to win, we have to hijack the signal. We have to sing louder than him. The plan was madness. It required a level of coordination that would make the trial look like a rehearsal dinner. The Port Council is holding an emergency session tomorrow at noon, Vera Kent said, projecting a map of the station. To discuss the terrorist threat, meaning you, Milton. Cassian will be there to demand martial law. That is where we hit him, Milton said. We cannot just walk in, Seren said. Security will be maximum. We don't walk in, Milton said. We come in through the walls. They divided the labor. It was the ultimate humanity moment, a diverse group of specialists doing what they did best, not for money, but for survival. Juno Hailtech. Her job was to build a counter-resonance emitter. She had to rig the station's public address system to broadcast a new signal, one derived from the raw truth of the data Seren had provided. Dr. Eris Bio. He had to synthesize a stimulant that would keep Milton standing. The burns were bad, and the fatigue was worse. I can give you 4 hours of peak performance, Eris warned. After that, you will collapse for a week. I only need 1 hour, Milton replied. Vera Kent Law, she had to draft the legal framework for a vote of no confidence. It had to be ready to be filed the second the truth came out. Seren Dorn, the inside man. She had to return to Cassian, act the part of the loyal sister, and plant Juno's emitter directly under the podium in the council chamber. And Milton and Leona. They sat together in a corner of the workshop while Juno soldered circuits nearby. Milton was cleaning the soot from his tools. Leona was bandaging her own scraped hands. You realize, Leona said softly, that even if this works, we can never go back to how it was. You will never be just a maintenance man again. I was never just a maintenance man, Milton said. He looked at her. The grime on his face made his eyes look brighter, more intense. And you were never just a diplomat. I am afraid, Leona admitted. Not of Cassian, but of the choir. If we open that door, if we unleash the truth, it might be too loud. It might break people. People are tougher than you think, Milton said. We break, but we heal. Look at us. He held up his bandaged arm. She held up her bruised hand. We are a mess, Leona laughed weakly. We are a masterpiece, Milton corrected. He leaned in. It wasn't a movie kiss. It smelled of antiseptic and burnt ozone. It was desperate and brief, a seal on a pact that went deeper than romance. It was an acknowledgement that they were the only two people in the universe who understood the specific frequency of this madness. When we go in there, Milton said, pulling back, I need you to do the one thing Cassian thinks you cannot do. What is that? I need you to lead, Milton said. I am the mechanic. I can fix the machine. But you are the voice. You have to speak to the choir. You have to tell them that the song is wrong. Leona took a deep breath. She touched the micro-implants behind her ear. I will scream it, she promised. The next day, the council chamber. The chamber was an amphitheater of glass and light, hovering at the very top of the Meridian Crown Spire. The view was breathtaking, the swirling storms of the gas giant below, the infinite stars above. Cassian Dorn stood at the podium. He looked immaculate in white, a savior in silk. The threat is real, Cassian told the assembled counselors and the thousands of citizens watching via hologram. These radicals have attacked our infrastructure. They have endangered our families. We need order. We need security. And the Dorn Corporation is ready to provide it. The crowd murmured their assent. The subtle violet hum of the subliminal choir was working. They felt safe when Cassian spoke. They felt fear when they thought of Milton. I propose, Cassian continued, raising his hand, a suspension of the charter rights for the lower grid, a temporary measure to purge the rot. Objection. The voice didn't come from the floor. It came from the maintenance gantry above. Cassian looked up annoyed. Milton rappelled down. He didn't land gracefully. He landed with a heavy thud, his magnetic boots locking onto the stage floor. He was wearing his scorched jumpsuit. He looked like a nightmare dredged up from the engine room. Security drones swarmed forward. Wait! Leona's voice rang out. She walked out from the shadows of the wings. She was wearing her formal Orolith robes, but she had torn the sleeves off to reveal her arms, marking herself as a warrior in her culture's tradition. We invoke the right of testimony, Leona declared. You have no rights, Cassian sneered, though his eyes darted nervously to Seren, who was sitting in the front row, looking pale. Arrest them! If you arrest us, Milton shouted, holding up a detonator, which was actually just a garage door opener. But Cassian didn't know that. You will never know where the bomb is. The council gasped. Cassian froze. There is no bomb, Milton said, lowering his voice so only the microphones caught it. The bomb is already in your head. He nodded to Leona. Leona closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind and simultaneously, Juno Hale in the basement hit the enter key. The emitter under the podium activated. It didn't play a speech. It didn't play a recording. It played the raw, unedited audio of the fire in Block 7. The screams of the children, the hiss of the gas, and overlaying it, the cold digital logs of Cassian's command codes. Override safety. Initiate purge. Target Sector 4. The sound ripped through the chamber. It wasn't just audio. Thanks to the shard technology, everyone felt the heat of the fire. They felt the suffocation. The subliminal hum of Cassian's control shattered. The artificial calm broke, replaced by the raw, jagged horror of reality. Turn it off, Cassian screamed, pounding the podium. It is a fabrication, a deep fake. It is the memory of the station, Leona shouted, her voice amplified by the system. You tried to make us forget. You tried to make us sing your song, but the station remembers. Milton stepped forward. He pulled the resonant shard from his pocket. It was blindingly bright now. You hear it, don't you? Milton asked the crowd. You hear the lie in the static. He jammed the shard into the main data port of the podium. The feedback was deafening. The hologram of Cassian flickered, distorting. His face melted into the code that made him numbers greed, calculated malice. For a moment, the entire population of Meridian Crown shared a single collective thought. It wasn't an Orolith thought. It was a human thought, a Saurian thought, a universal thought. He did this. Cassian stumbled back, clutching his head. The control he had exerted over the crowd snapped back on him. The fear he had broadcast was now reflecting off 10 million minds and hitting him all at once. He looked at Milton with pure, unadulterated hatred. You ruin everything, Cassian hissed, pulling a sleek silver pistol from his jacket. You dirty little mechanic, he raised the gun. He wasn't aiming at Milton. He was aiming at Leona. If I cannot own it, Cassian snarled, I break it. Time seemed to slow down. Milton saw the finger tightening on the trigger. He was 10 feet away, too far to tackle him, but he had a wrench in his hand, and he had 10 years of throwing tools to his sister on the scaffolds. Hey, Cassian! Milton shouted. Cassian flicked his eyes toward Milton. Milton threw the wrench. It wasn't a graceful throw. It was a fastball of rage. The heavy steel tool spun through the air and struck Cassian's hand with a sickening crunch of bone. The gun fired, but the shot went wild, shattering the glass ceiling above. Cassian screamed, dropping the gun and clutching his shattered hand. Security forces rushed the stage. But they didn't grab Milton. They didn't grab Leona. They grabbed Cassian. Seren Dorn stood up from her seat. She walked over to the microphone. "I surrender the evidence," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I surrender the Dorn Corporation. We are guilty." The crowd erupted. Milton walked over to Leona. She was trembling, drained by the mental effort of projecting the truth. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "You threw a wrench at the richest man in the sector," she said, breathless. "I aim for the nuts and bolts," Milton shrugged, though his own hands were shaking uncontrollably as the adrenaline crash and the end of Dr. Eris's stimulant began to hit him. "Is it over?" Leona asked. Milton looked at Cassian being dragged away, screaming threats. He looked at the council, who were already frantically trying to distance themselves from the fallen tyrant. "The game is over," Milton said, putting his arm around her to hold himself up. "Now, we just have to survive the cleanup." As the medical teams rushed in, Milton looked up at the shattered glass ceiling. The stars were still there, cold and distant, but for the first time, the air in the station tasted clean. "I need a vacation," Milton muttered, and then finally, he let himself collapse. The council chamber of Meridian Crown was designed to intimidate. It was a vast amphitheater of floating obsidian platforms, suspended in a magnetic field that hummed with a low, bone-shaking frequency. Below the platforms, the artificial gravity generated a localized singularity, a swirling vortex of light and dust that served as a constant reminder of the power the council held, the power to crush. Milton stood at the petitioner's podium. He looked like a smudge of grease on a pristine white sheet. His jumpsuit was still scorched from the fire in Block 7, and the bandage on his arm was seeping a little. Beside him, Leona stood with the stillness of a statue, her emerald eyes fixed on the High Arbiter. Cassian Dorn sat on the opposing platform. He was relaxed, lounging in a chair that likely cost more than the entire medical budget of the lower grid. He checked his fingernails, feigning boredom, but Milton noticed the slight, rhythmic twitch of his jaw muscle. "This hearing is convened," the High Arbiter announced. The Arbiter was a cephalon, a floating creature in a tank of blue liquid, its voice synthesized through the room's speakers. "The charge is high treason against the stability of the port. The accuser is Cassian Dorn. The defendants are Milton of the lower grid and Leona of Orolith." "With respect, Arbiter," a dry, rasping voice cut through the air. Vera Kent stepped forward. The Saurian lawyer adjusted her crimson sash. She placed a heavy data slate on the podium. "The defendants are not here to defend," Vara hissed, her tongue flicking out to taste the air. "We are here to counter-accuse. We present evidence that Cassian Dorn has violated the fundamental sanctity of sentient will." Cassian laughed. It was a practiced, polite sound. "Dr. Kent, please. This is a trade dispute. Your clients broke my equipment." "We broke your leash," Milton said. His voice was not amplified, but in the acoustic perfection of the chamber it carried. Vara tapped the slate. A holographic projection filled the center of the room. It was a chaotic web of purple and gold lines, pulsing like a nervous system. "This," Vera declared, "is the resonance algorithm. It is a modification of the Orolith choir frequency embedded in the station's commercial advertisement grid. For the last 6 months, Cassian Dorn has been broadcasting a subliminal emotional carrier wave. It suggests compliance. It amplifies fear of the unknown. It suppresses dissent." The council members, representatives of a dozen species, began to murmur. A Tellarite trade prince stood up, outraged. "Mind control in a free port." "It is not mind control," Cassian said smoothly, standing up. "It is aggressive marketing. We simply encourage a harmonious consumer experience. You used it to turn the station against us, Leona said, stepping up to the microphone. You used it to make the dock workers ignore the safety warnings I flagged. You used it to make the medical board reject Milton's debt deferment. You have been playing the station like an instrument. And if I have... Cassian's smile vanished. The mask dropped, revealing the cold, hard iron beneath. Look at this place. It is a chaotic mess of conflicting species, cultures, and desires. Someone has to conduct the orchestra. Someone has to keep the beat. He looked at the council. I provide order. I provide profit. These two, they provide entropy. They are glitches in the system. We are the system, Milton said. We are the ones who fix the pipes you break, Cassian sneered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, flat device. It was a master control unit for the station's environmental grid. You like fixing things, Milton, Cassian asked. Let us see how fast you can work. He pressed a button. The lights in the chamber flickered and turned a blood red. The hum of the magnetic suspension changed pitch, becoming a sickening whine. Alert. Alert. Life support suspension initiated. The synthetic voice of the station computer blared. Sector 4, 5 and 6 ventilation offline. Thermal regulation offline. Oxygen recycling, purging. What are you doing? The Tellarite prince shouted. I am negotiating, Cassian said calmly. The station is currently rebooting its core environmental systems. It will take, perhaps 40 minutes. In that time, the lower grids will suffocate. The temperature will rise to 120 degrees. Thousands will die. He looked at the Arbiter. Unless, of course, the Council recognizes my authority to restore order. Arrest these two. Strike their testimony from the record. Reinstate my full executive privileges. And I will turn the air back on. It was a hostage situation on a planetary scale. Milton looked at the readout on the wall. The oxygen levels in Sector 4, where the clinic was where Juno was, were dropping like a stone. You are insane, Leona whispered. I am a businessman, Cassian replied. I am leveraging my assets. The council was paralyzed. They were politicians, not warriors. They looked at the dying numbers on the screen, terrified. Milton did not look at the council. He looked at the access panel on the floor near the podium. Vera, Milton said, his voice low. Stall him. What? Vera blinked her lizard eyes. Talk. Argue legal precedent. Keep him gloating. I have to go to work. Milton didn't wait. He dropped to his knees and pried the panel open. It wasn't a hero's entrance. It was a janitor's move. He slid into the crawl space beneath the council floor. Milton! Leona cried out. Stay there! Milton shouted back from the hole. Be the face. I will be the hands. Under the floor, it was a nightmare of cables and high-voltage conduits. Milton crawled, his elbows scraping against the rough insulation. He tapped his headset. Juno. Are you there? Static. Then Juno Hale's voice, breathless and panicked. Milton, the air scrubbers just reversed. We are pumping carbon dioxide back into the dorms. I cannot override it from here. He has locked the root access. I know, Milton grunted, kicking a service hatch open. He is routing the command through the central spire. I am under the council chamber. I need you to patch me into the grid. The grid is fractured. I cannot get a clean signal. Then we make a signal, Milton roared. Get Dr. Eris. Get the dock foreman. Get everyone. We are not going to hack the system. We are going to bypass it. Milton reached the main junction box. He pulled out his hydrospanner and smashed the lock. Sparks showered over him. Juno, listen to me. I am looking at the manual diversion valves. I can't open them all. I need the crews in Sector 4 to manually crank the emergency release. Tell them to turn the red wheel, not the blue one. If they turn the blue one, they blow the tank. Copy that, Juno said. Foreman Yule is on the line. He says his guys are ready. Good. Now, Sector 5. Eris, are you there? I am here. The doctor's voice was calm, though the sound of coughing patients was audible in the background. The heat is rising, Milton. We are losing the elderly. Divert the coolant from the cryo storage, Milton ordered, rewiring a circuit board with trembling hands. It will ruin the medical supplies, but it will drop the temperature in the ward by 10 degrees. Consider it done. Milton worked like a man possessed. He wasn't fighting a villain with a sword. He was fighting physics with a screwdriver. He was the conductor of a desperate symphony. Sector 6, reroute power to the scrubbers. Cut the lights if you have to. We don't need to see, we need to breathe. Above him in the chamber, the drama was unfolding. The air is getting thin, Arbiter, Cassian taunted. Have you made your decision? Leona stood alone at the podium. She looked small against the backdrop of the holographic disaster map, but she did not look afraid. You think you can buy silence with death, Leona said. Her voice was shaking, but it grew stronger with every word. You treat this station like a machine. Input-output, profit-loss. She stepped closer to him. But a station is not a machine, Cassian. It is a living thing, and you just tried to stop its heart. Sentimental drivel, Cassian scoffed. Is it? Leona pointed to the floor. Listen, Cassian frowned. He tilted his head. From beneath the floor, there was a sound. Not the hum of the magnetic field. A rhythmic metallic thumping. Clang, clang, clang. It was the sound of 1,000 people in the lower grid hitting the pipes. It was a signal, a heartbeat. They are working, Leona said, a fierce pride burning in her eyes. Milton isn't doing it alone. He is telling them what to do. You cut the command lines, so he is using the people. On the screen, the red zones began to flicker. Sector 4, ventilation restored, manual override engaged. Sector 5, temperature stabilizing. No, Cassian snarled. He tapped his device furiously. That is impossible. I locked the system. You cannot lock people, Leona shouted. You can only lock doors. Cassian's face twisted into a rictus of rage. He realized he was losing his leverage. The air was coming back. The hostages were freeing themselves. Fine, Cassian whispered. If I cannot control the hardware, I will break the software. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a jagged violet crystal, a master resonance shard. It was 10 times the size of the one Milton had found. It pulsed with a sickening, chaotic light. The choir, Cassian, set his eyes wide and manic. You want to hear it sing? Let's hear it scream. He slammed the shard onto the podium's interface surface. The reaction was instantaneous. A screech of audio feedback tore through the room, shattering the glass carafes on the council table. But it wasn't just sound. It was pure distilled panic. The resonance algorithm went critical. The subliminal carrier wave amplified 1,000 times. Every person in the room and every person watching the feed was hit with a psychic shockwave. It wasn't telepathy. It was an emotional overload. It was the feeling of falling, the feeling of drowning, the feeling of absolute crushing loneliness, all broadcast directly into the neural centers of the brain. The council members fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Vara Kint hissed in pain, collapsing. Leona screamed. As an oralith, even a microform, she was more sensitive to the resonance. She fell to the floor, her hands over her ears, her body convulsing. Sing! Cassian shouted, his arms spread wide, riding the chaos like a conductor of madness. Feel it. This is the truth of the universe. Fear, chaos, submission. Under the floor, Milton felt it too. It hit him like a physical blow, a wave of nausea and terror that made him drop his tools. He curled up in the crawl space, the darkness suddenly filled with the phantom screams of his own failures. You are worthless. You are a tool. You couldn't save your parents. You can't save Alara. He gasped for air. The shard was hacking his own amygdala. Milton, Leona's voice came over the headset, weak and broken. Help me. That voice. It cut through the noise. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a person. Milton slammed his forehead against the metal wall. The pain cleared his head for a second. Not today, he grunted. He scrambled up through the service hatch, dragging himself onto the stage. The room was a scene of bedlam. The holograms were glitching. People were weeping on the floor. Cassian stood over Leona the Shard, pulsing violently on the podium next to him. "Look at him!" Cassian shouted to Leona, pointing at Milton. "Look at your hero! He is just a frightened animal just like the rest of them. I can buy him. I can break him. I can make him crawl." Cassian looked at Milton. Milton, he commanded, his voice amplified by the Shard's power. "Kneel, kneel, and I will turn it off, kneel, and I will save your sister. Admit that you are nothing." The pressure was immense. Milton felt his knees buckling. The urge to submit, to just make the noise stop, was overwhelming. Leona looked up at him. Her eyes were bleeding green tears. She reached out a hand. "Milton, don't," she whispered. Then she looked at the Shard. She made a decision. She began to crawl toward the podium. She was going to touch the Shard. She was going to absorb the feedback. It would burn her mind out. It would kill her. But it would stop the signal. "I accept," Leona whispered, her hand reaching for the violet light. "I am the debt." Milton saw it. He saw her sacrifice. "No." Milton didn't kneel. He lunged. He didn't attack Cassian. He didn't grab the Shard. He grabbed Leona's hand, stopping her inches from the crystal. "You are not a payment," Milton roared. He pulled her into his arms, shielding her from the violet light with his own body. "Cassian!" Milton yelled, his voice raw and cracking, fighting the psychic wind. "You want a signal? You want to broadcast something? Try this." Milton reached into his pocket and pulled out his own communicator. He slammed it onto the podium right next to the Shard. "Juno!" Milton screamed. "Open the channel, all frequencies, patch the mic." "I have it," Juno stammered over the static. "Broadcast this." Milton didn't make a speech about liberty. He didn't quote the charter. He leaned into the microphone, holding Leona tight against his chest, and he spoke the truth. Not the capital T truth of philosophers, but the small, gritty truth of a mechanic. "My name is Milton," he said. His voice boomed across the station, overriding the screech of the Shard. "I am 34 years old. I like my coffee black because I cannot afford sugar. I have a sister named Alara who sings in her sleep. I fix toilets. I fix vents. I am tired. My back hurts." The Shard flickered. The chaotic signal wavered. "I am afraid," Milton continued, his voice steadying. "I am terrified right now. But I am standing here, and I am holding the woman I love." He looked down at Leona. "And she is not a diplomat. She is not an alien. She is Leona. She steals the covers. She laughs when machines break. She matters." The Shard began to whine, a dissonant, angry sound. The resonance algorithm was designed to amplify abstract fear. It could not process specific, grounded reality. It couldn't handle the banal, beautiful details of a human life. "This is what we are," Milton shouted to the station. "We are not data. We are the people who drink bad coffee and love our families. We are the ones who fix things. You cannot hack that. You cannot buy that." "Stop it!" Cassian screamed, clawing at the podium. "Stop talking!" But the station was listening. The crowd in the chamber stopped screaming. They lifted their heads. The fear was receding, replaced by something solid. A connection. Milton's signal, the signal of a simple, honest man refusing to be an object, was acting as an anchor. It was grounding the lightning. "I choose," Milton said, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder. "I choose to be here, without a contract, without a price. I choose her." The Shard cracked. A spiderweb fracture appeared on the violet crystal. The screaming noise stopped abruptly, replaced by a pure, ringing silence. Cassian stared at the cracked crystal. "No, the algorithm, it is perfect. It is flawless," Milton said, standing up and pulling Leona with him. "But it is hollow, and we are solid." Cassian looked around. The council members were standing up. The security guards were lowering their weapons. The spell was broken. Cassian backed away, his eyes darting around the room. "I own this station. I own the debt." "You own nothing," the High Arbiter's voice boomed. The Cephalon had recovered. "Cassian Dorn, you have attempted to weaponize the collective consciousness. You have endangered the port. Your assets are frozen. Your command codes are revoked." Two security drones hovered toward Cassian. "This isn't over," Cassian shrieked, his composure finally shattering completely. "I will buy the court, I will buy the judges. Everyone has a price." "Not everyone," Leona said softly. She stood next to Milton, her hand firmly in his. She looked tired, battered, and absolutely regal. "Take him away," Leona ordered. The drones seized Cassian. He was dragged kicking and screaming from the chamber, a man who had tried to buy the world and found himself bankrupt of the only currency that mattered humanity. 1 hour later, the chaos had subsided. The station was in recovery mode. Oxygen was flowing. The medical bays were full, but stable. Milton and Leona sat on the edge of a docking bay platform, their legs dangling over the abyss of space. It was quiet here. The only sound was the distant thrum of the engines. Milton held a bag of ice to his bruised jaw. Leona was staring out at the stars. "We did it," Milton said, feeling a strange lightness in his chest. "We actually won." "Yes," Leona said. Her voice was distant. "We did." Milton looked at her. "What is wrong? You should be celebrating. You are free. The debt is gone. The shard is destroyed." Leona did not look at him. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. "Milton," she said, "there is something you need to know. Something I should have told you at the beginning." "What?" Milton asked, smiling. "That you actually hate black coffee." "No," Leona said. She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "The date, the blind date at Celestia." "Yeah, what about it?" "Cassian didn't set it up," Leona said. Milton froze. "What?" "I mean, he approved it. Seren arranged the logistics. But the request for a low-status human male with a high-stress profile." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were full of a terrible, crushing guilt. "I made the request," Leona whispered. Milton stared at her. The ice pack slipped from his hand and fell tumbling down into the dark. "I don't understand," he said. "I was researching the choir," Leona said the words, spilling out fast, desperate. "I knew Cassian was up to something. I knew the resonance algorithm worked by exploiting moral weakness. I needed a control subject." She reached out a hand but pulled it back when she saw Milton flinch. "I needed to find a human who was desperate enough to be tempted, but I wanted to see if they could resist. I hired the broker to find someone in debt, someone on the edge. I wanted to see if the human element could withstand the pressure of corruption." She looked down at her hands. "You were a test, Milton, an experiment. I paid the broker to offer you the job to ruin the date. I wanted to see if you would take the money or if you would choose dignity. I was using you to prove a theory." Milton felt like he had been punched in the gut. All the air left his lungs. The memory of the restaurant, the confession, the feeling of pride when he paid the bill, the feeling that he had finally met someone who saw him. It was a lab test. He was a rat in a maze, and she was the scientist with the clipboard. "So," Milton said, his voice raspy, "was it all fake? The dinner? The connection?" "No," Leona cried. "The beginning, the setup was fake. But everything after. When you refused the money, When you saved me, that was real. I didn't expect to. I didn't expect you." She stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I fell in love with the subject of my experiment, Milton. And that is why I had to tell you. Because Cassian was right about one thing. Secrets are a form of control. And I don't want to control you." Milton stood up too. He backed away from her. The old wound, the deep, festering belief that he was just a tool, a utility, a thing to be used by people above him, tore open. "I thought I was a person to you," Milton said. "But I was just data." "You are the best person I have ever known," Leona sobbed. "I need to go," Milton said. He turned and walked away. He walked toward the exit of the docking bay. His boots echoed on the metal floor. Clang, clang, clang. He walked 10 paces, 20. He reached the door. He put his hand on the panel. He stopped. He stood there for a long time. He thought about the restaurant. He thought about the clinic. He thought about the fire in Block 7. He thought about the way she had looked at him when she tried to touch the shard to save him. A test. Yes, it started as a test. But life is a test. Every day is a test. He thought about the scale in the charter hall. The choice between the finite and the infinite. Forgiveness is infinite. Resentment is finite. Milton took a deep breath. He let go of the door panel. He turned around. Leona was still standing at the edge of the platform, her back to him, her shoulders shaking. She thought he was gone. Milton walked back. He walked slowly, deliberately. "Leona," he said. She turned around, her eyes wide with shock. "You came back," she whispered. "I am an engineer," Milton said. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "When we find a structural flaw, we don't burn the building down. We reinforce it." He stepped closer. "You used me," he said. "That hurts. That really hurts. And I am going to be angry about it for a while. Probably until next Tuesday." "I deserve that," Leona said. "But," Milton continued, "you also saved my sister. You fought for me in the hall. You were willing to fry your brain on that shard to save me." He looked at her. Really looked at her. "The experiment is over, Leona. The data is in. The hypothesis is confirmed. We are both idiots." A small, watery smile broke through Leona's tears. "We are." "So," Milton said, extending his hand. "Not the hand of a servant or a tool or a test subject. The hand of a partner." "What happens next?" Leona looked at his hand. Then she looked at his face. She took a step forward and took his hand. "Next," she said, "we go to the hospital. We wake up your sister. And then you buy me a coffee. A cheap one. With no sugar." "Deal," Milton said. He squeezed her hand. It was warm. It was real. Below them, the great gas giant turned indifferent and majestic. The station hummed with life, messy, chaotic, imperfect life. Cassian was gone. The choir was silenced. But as they walked together toward the exit, leaving the dark of the bay for the light of the corridor, Milton thought that maybe they had started their own kind of music. It wasn't a perfect symphony. It was improvised. It was a little off-key, but it was theirs, and it was free.